Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos and I'm here thanks to my power-boosted, open-ended trans-mat beam, courtesy of the Five Doctors. Because this is the second episode in our two-part investigation into the musicals of Doctor Who, which Musical Talk is investigating as part of the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, the world's longest-running science fiction television programme, and a British legend. Well, if you remember in part 1, I'd like to say it ended with a cliffhanger, but of course, unfortunately it didn't. But in that episode, we identified 5 shows which we considered to be Doctor Who musicals, at least in some form. Although we also noted that there was no true musical of Doctor Who, by which we mean one that follows the normal tropes of a musical theatre piece, such as an opening chorus and a finale, things like that, the things you'd expect to see on the stage. But we did say that the show which is most often thought of as the Doctor Who musical is a piece called Doctor Who, The Ultimate Adventure, a stage adaptation of Doctor Who featuring both Jon Pertwee and then later on in the run Colin Baker, so real actors who played the Doctor in the television series, which was on stage in 1989, very nearly 25 years ago. And today's episode of Musical Talk is devoted entirely to an investigation of this show. And so later in the programme, you'll hear an interview with Stephen Edis, the noted musical director who wrote the songs for the original show, and Jason Haigh-Ellery, who directed the show when it was revived for an audio recording in 2008, in what was an attempt to capture a piece of Doctor Who ephemera, which, being a stage show, was never previously recorded in any commercial way. But before we get into the in-depth discussion about how The Ultimate Adventure came to be and its musical credentials, we need to remember that it was a stage show aimed very squarely at the family audience, and in some senses took the tropes and themes and feeling of a British pantomime. There was no breaking the fourth wall, but there was a sense of heightened performance and of not taking itself too seriously across the board. It did feature 3 songs, but it never advertised itself as a musical. In fact, if you go to the original posters, you can see that the things they really advertise are the fact that it's Doctor Who on stage and features, and I quote, stunning high-tech and laser effects. For many people, the fact there were songs in it proved to be a bit of a surprise once they'd got into the auditorium. And I was one of those people. I was 19 when The Ultimate Adventure finally made it to the stage. And I saw it 3 times. Once in Wimbledon in its initial week with my family to see Jon Pertwee in the role, and then twice more when Colin Baker had taken over as the Doctor, once with a friend of mine, and a second time again with my family, but this time at the Congress Theatre in Eastbourne. And whilst we enjoyed it very much, I remember very clearly being a little bit worried about the songs and really not being interested in them at all, as seemed to be the case for most of the audience. It's useful perhaps to set up the context here. In the 1980s, Doctor Who fandom was still quite young, and it must be said, a little bit po-faced about its favourite television programme. Any sense of having fun with it was deemed to be in some way disrespectful, and so we all took it incredibly seriously indeed. In fact, it was only by going off air for a few years that most of us who stayed fans was able to mature and come to terms with the fact that whilst it is an absolutely splendid and brilliant television programme, it is also very funny, sometimes unintentionally. There's a great deal of fun to be had from Doctor Who, both from a genuine appreciation and from taking the mickey. But you can imagine in this slightly po-faced environment that whilst families who went in with no expectations had a fantastic time, those of us who wanted to see a slice of real, and that's in speech marks, Doctor Who, were a little bit nervous about the romp that we were seeing on stage. And the songs merely added to that. 3 songs in total, one called Strange Attractor, which is essentially an 80s pop song, a song called Business is Business, which was the comedy number, and finally Sky High, a love song. And I must tell you, and it's embarrassing to recall this, but I do remember the audience genuinely letting their dissatisfaction with this number shine forth when it came on in the first week at Wimbledon. But what a difference a quarter of a century makes, because now all those songs which were very much of their type and therefore maybe didn't stand out amongst other 80s numbers, when taken out of the context of the 1980s, seem absolutely to be resonant with nostalgia and all the tropes of the late 80s. All three songs feel absolutely of their time, but now that we're not part of that time, are wonderful in their own way. And they are much better than at the time I thought they were. And if you talk to other Doctor Who fans, that seems to be the general consensus. So how did the show come about? Well, a well-known stage producer by the name of Mark Furness decided that he wanted to put on a Doctor Who stage play, and he approached the BBC and the then producer of Doctor Who, John Nathan Turner. Doctor Who was still then in production on television, although getting towards the end of its original run. He approached John Nathan Turner in 1988 and said that he wanted well-known Doctor Who writer Terence Dicks to write the story. Apparently, Terence Dicks recalls that John Nathan Turner was very happy for there to be a stage play, but wanted to direct it himself and wanted two current writers, Andrew Cartmel and Ben Aronovich, to write the script, which they duly did, and which was far too optimistic for stage production. So Mark Furness went back to the BBC and said, well, thank you very much, but I still want Terence Dicks to write a script, because I can't put this one that you've presented actually onto the stage. And so it was that Terence Dicks, who'd been script editor and author of Doctor Who since the late 60s, right up to his last involvement with the series on television in 1983, ended up writing what was to be The Ultimate Adventure. Time was starting to run out, however, because the show was scheduled to start in Wimbledon on a tour from March 1989. But the delays with the BBC meant that Terence Dicks was only able to provide a plot synopsis as late as December 1988. And the final script was finally signed off on the 22nd of February 1989, about a month before the first performance. I don't know about you, but that seems incredibly disturbing to me. And Mark Furness was a man who knew how to stage set pieces. And so he said to Terence Dicks, as writer, you can do whatever you want, but I want the following things. And he gave him a shopping list of things that he had an ability to put on stage. He had a company that allowed for flying on stage, so there had to be a flying number. He had a guillotine prop, and he wanted, therefore, a scene set in the French Revolution. And it was Mark Furness who said, and I want songs. And so Terence Dicks put all this into the script. He didn't write the songs himself. They were written by Stephen Edis, and we'll be hearing an interview with him shortly in the programme. But Terence did point out something which we discussed last week on Musical Talk, which is, usually when you go to see a piece of musical theatre, you're happy enough to see non-diegetic songs, which are songs which are just sung out due to the exuberance of the emotion taking place. They just come from nowhere. They're not set up. Diegetic songs are when somebody says, I'm now going to sing a song and does so. Non-diegetic is when they do it anyway. We're used to the convention in musical theatre. We don't bat an eyelid. In Doctor Who, that seemed a lot harder to take, and so of the three songs, Terence Dicks was able to work two of them into the plot, but he just simply couldn't find a way to make the third one, the love song, Sky High, and he recalls writing introduction lines to try and explain why the song would be sung. But every time they were used on the stage, the audience just laughed at them for being ridiculous. So in the end, they just threw all that away and said, right, we'll just sing the song. And so it is that the third song is a non-diegetic song. So, as we're now talking about the songs, let's hear an interview with Stephen Edis, who wrote those songs for The Ultimate Adventure in early 1989. I caught up with him at the Hackney Empire, where he's currently musical director for their Christmas pantomime Puss in Boots. So let's hear from him now. Musical Talk. Well, Steve, it's a great pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for giving me a slice of time in your extremely busy schedule, because you're
pleasure.
Gearing up for a pantomime here in Hackney at the Hackney Empire.
That's right, yes.
But it's very good of you to talk also about something that's right from the beginning of your very impressive career as a musical director, which is Doctor Who, The Ultimate Adventure, which first saw the light of day in 1989, as at least on stage.
Yeah.
But of course you are the first person to have written songs for Doctor Who, I think, ever.
Well,
that's
quite an honour, really.
How did can you remember how you first became aware of the idea of a stage show, and take it from there, really?
I think it was It was the producer, Mark Furness, who's no longer with us, who I worked for quite a bit at that time. I think it was his idea. He was certainly the producer in the end, so I think that was the starting point.
He had approached the BBC production office, because it was still on television at the time in its original
yes,
run.
Yes, it was. He got the blessing of the BBC, and we had a fun time going to the radiophonic workshop, as it was, I think, still called then.
Is that in Maid of Vale?
Yeah.
Yes.
And we got loads of their sound effects as samples that we used on the keyboards, so sort of TARDIS door opening and stuff like that.
So sorry, forgive me. So you weren't just musical director; you were also operating the sound effects. In
well,
a sense, or at least
there were. It was a high budget band of two, both on electric keyboards, and because there were so many spot cues of TARDIS flying and
Sonic
Screwdriver. Yeah, we did quite a few of those, and trying out our new at the time sampling technology keyboards that we had.
Yes, because as I say, it's 1989, which is sort of right at the beginning of the the electronic age
of sampling
as it's developed now.
being affordable. Yeah. So it was a question of going to the BBC studios and pilfering their library and putting it all so it was accessible from the keyboard.
So you're genuinely a man who can say he's controlled the TARDIS?
Yes, I am. I've certainly made the door open.
Which is more than I've ever done.
But going back to your original question, Mark Furness, I think, had approached the BBC and got their blessing, and Terence Dix, who was one of the main script writers,
yes,
came to write our play for us.
He had written a non-musical Doctor Who stage play in the 70s, so he was an old hand.
I didn't know that. You know more than I do.
And as you say, worked on the series.
Yeah.
It's not a musical per se. It is certainly a show that's got 3 songs in it.
It's got, yes, sort of 2.5 really.
I think you underestimate yourself.
Well, we cut one quite drastically halfway through the run. Yes, it had 3 songs. I don't really know why
the motivation was.
Why somebody decided it should be a musical version, and we didn't really think of it as a sort of typical musical theatre piece. It was an adaptation which happened to have a couple of songs in it for fun, I suppose.
I mean, you're right. It doesn't have a structure of a musical. There's no opening chorus.
No.
2 of the songs are diegetic in the sense they take place within the narrative, don't they? I mean,
yes.
Shall we talk about the songs? So
that's
the first
a very good word. Come across. I must drop that into conversations.
All diegetic and non-diegetic are our lifeblood on musical talk.
Right. Okay. Yes. Two of them are part of the plot.
Which is Strange Attractor, which is
yes. You've become my strange attractor. Yes, I can remember some of the other lyrics.
You didn't write the lyrics yourself?
I did actually.
Oh,
yes, I wrote the lyrics for that.
You are? Oh, marvellous. So it's the full song experience.
Yes, I sort of allow myself to write not too deep and serious lyrics.
Well,
so that qualified, and panto also.
Well, there is, I'm not... I love panto, so I never use it pejoratively. I genuinely think of it as a great family entertainment.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
And this Doctor Who show is not a million miles of that from away in tone.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't take itself very realistically, and I think the songs that you've written are tap into that.
Yes.
One
yes, I think that's right.
I think has very much got its tongue in its cheek. But Strange Attractor is actually a very, if you don't mind me saying, I think it's an absolutely cracking late 1980s number.
Oh well, thank you very much. There was half an idea that Kylie Minogue was going to play the Doctor's assistant because she was absolutely in that sort of mould, and maybe Jason Donovan would have played Jason as well. I don't know.
That's how it was certainly suggested in the press when they were building up interest.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I thought a little rip-off of a Stock Aitken Waterman number would be appropriate.
And absolutely mainstream at the time, wasn't it?
Yes. Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah.
Did you know how to slot the songs into the script? Because I'm told that the final version of the script by Terence Dix arrived in December 1988, and the show started in March 1989. So that's a very narrow window, even for. We know that theatre often flies by the seat of its pants, as they say. But
I'm quite quick once I get an idea. I mean, I think they. I don't think either of the. No, actually, I don't think any of the songs were ready when we started rehearsing.
Oh, really?
We did it during the rehearsal period.
But in a way, that would help contextualise them.
Yeah. So it's I mean, very much like what I'm doing here at Hackney for Panto. It's a bit last minute, but there's no point in planning ahead because as soon as you start rehearsing, it's all going to be changed anyway.
Everything changes. Yes, it's. I love theatre, but it very much is building a house on shifting sands, isn't it, in some senses. So that first song, this is where the girl who's going to become the Doctor's companion for the show is actually a nightclub singer.
She is.
And this is her opening debut number.
We see her performing in the nightclub where she is, as it were, picked up by the Doctor. Yeah.
Yes, in the middle of a sort of mercenary attack from outer space, I believe.
Oh, yes,
is the key to make that happen.
I remember some banging going on, yes.
In the nicest possible sense, Your Honour. But the song is, I don't know how much, well, you obviously do remember it, but listening back from because it's been redone, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it is a very late 80s number, it's high energy, it stands alone very nicely because it's a standalone song. Did you get the sense that you were performing, that you were writing absolutely in the mainstream of pop culture at that time? You said you sort of borrowed, at least conceptually, from
I don't really think I've ever been in the mainstream of anything, really, but in theatre generally, you have to be a sort of jack of all trades, and I think of myself sometimes not so much as a composer, but more of a sort of pastiche artist. So it was just,
one goes often hand in hand with the other, I find. Sometimes is the same.
Self pastiche.
You and I think.
So that song, it was very easy to write once we had the setting for it, and once we decided it was going to be that sort of a number. Yeah. Just go away and write it.
But it's very successful, it's very catchy. I mean, it's got a genuine hook.
Thank you very much.
Other people who have heard it have said, this feels like a very good Eurovision entry. In fact, probably ought to have been one.
I've tried writing a few of those as well in my time.
I believe everyone in the country has got 2 or 3 in their trunk somewhere. And it's usually the ones who are not songwriters who get through, I notice sometimes. Yeah. But so that's Strange Attractor. The first act also has the second song. Now, I think there's an age shift. This is Business, which is set in the... it borrows...
A sort of another nightclub, but a spacey, galactic nightclub.
Where Madame Delilah, I think, she runs the nightclub for mercenaries on this alien planet. And she sets out her stall very obviously, in fact, literally, at the beginning of the scene in which she's introduced by singing Business is Business. And she's almost a diva songstress in her own nightclub, as it were. And she sings this... when I was a boy, because I went to see it when I was 19, both with John Pertwee and then later on with Colin Baker,
yes.
I remember that the audience loved Business is Business because it was funny, it was...
Yes, it had a lot of aliens on stage as well.
It did indeed. I mean, in a sense, it was the BBC's, or the stage version, the Doctor Who cut price version of the Star Wars Cantina scene, I think, in some senses. And I seem to remember one of the characters who was dressed in an alien costume was not tremendously subtly strapped into a revolving device at the back of the stage so that they could drink some cocktail from this bar and then spin around. It was like a manual version of Quantel on television, if you get my drift.
Yeah, it's vaguely coming back to me.
But the song itself is for what it is, it's a triumph because it sets out its stall as Madame Delilah does. The song sets out its stall right at the beginning. So the first beats, the tone, the rhythm lets you know you're in a saloon kind of bar.
Yes, this kind of sleazy vibe going on.
That's right, yes. I mean, obviously a family-friendly sleazy, but I'm going to write that down and look at that later to see if I can work out what it means, but you understand. And then the very first lines are, she starts with business is business, we always aim to please. And then from then on, it's a series of almost gag-laden lyrics.
Yes.
So, later on when she repeats that, she maims to please rather than aims to please. Yeah. And then there's a rhyme for spectacular is tentacular.
Yes.
I seem to remember, which obviously in an alien environment is more likely.
Yes, absolutely. So appropriate. I hasten to add I didn't write those lyrics. I think those were Carol Todd's, our director and choreographer. But the song
really supports that. It's a very good fusion of the intent of the lyric and the intent of the music, or so it seems to me. And actually with the scene, I mean, it does set up that scene, which is a friendly but pretend menacing environment. So
it's the kind of song that does what it has to do. It just presents it and presents the environment that they're in.
Yeah, it's a contextualisation song in a way, isn't it? Absolutely. And once again, it's diegetic because she is singing it to her mercenaries, and at the end they all clap her, and then she gets on with meeting the Doctor, etc., etc.
Yeah, and it introduces, I think that's the first time we see Madame Delilah, and
yes.
So it introduces her character as much as the environment.
Did you, I mean, obviously you're a man of vast musical experience. These songs are very, very different. You know, Strange Attractor is what I would think of as a 1980s style, high energy. It's not a ballad, it's a punching.
No, it's a sort of, it's a pop song.
It is, yeah. It's very up. This is a kind of louche, comically louche, but louche song with a very different. In a way, it's almost a song that feels more in a musical theatre context, or at least a cabaret context, which of course is what's being portrayed on stage.
Yeah, well, that's the musical language of that. But as I say, it's all about pastiching and deciding what your musical milieu is for each number.
As I say, because pastiche it's so easy to say, oh, I pastiche the elements that I think of as being essentially part of the cabaret or the lounge scene. But how do you identify those? You know, in your musical director's...
Oh.
With your musical director's ear, I was going to say eye, but ear must be rather more important.
I'm not sure I can put that into words, actually. It's. I suppose you kind of think of all the songs that you know that have been written and that you have played that are trying to put that sort of feeling across, and somehow they distill and fuse together. And
so you are the catalyst of the synthesis. I feel we're treading onto academic
using
ground.
a lot of words here that
Which then takes us, I think, onto the third song in the
Sky
sequence,
High,
which is the non-diegetic number,
yes,
which is the one that they sing just because they're basically
just because they're there and falling in love, possibly.
Well, yes, it's clever. I actually think it's clever in its own way because there's two things going on. They're escaping the Daleks. They've landed on a planet with very low gravity, so obviously the Kirby wires have come out and everyone's sort of bouncing up and down.
Yes. But fortunately, an Earth-like atmosphere.
Yes, so often away, I find. Yes. So they're bouncing up and down, so there is a sense that they are trying to reach for the sky. But of course, it's also the one where they're starting to fall in love with each other. This is the male hero and the female hero, who weren't played by Kylie and weren't played by Jason. Rebecca Thornhill, I think.
Yes, indeed.
Was it Graham Smith?
Was the that's right.
Played a gentleman.
Yeah.
So they sing this song, which is essentially a love song, with a light display, I seem to remember as well, because it was quite a high-tech show at the time.
Yeah, there was early use of projection, which is now so popular in theatre.
1989 was certainly
we had a kind of laser display board, or it was a video really, but yes, we had a lot of effects. There was a meteorite storm as well, so not in the Sky High moment, but
in another scene
earlier on, which
borrows something from the Space Invaders craze that had taken place only earlier in the 80s. It was like seeing it on stage,
hurtling towards you. Yeah,
I remember that. It seemed quite thrilling at the time. It seemed. I mean, I look back now and I realise it was a middle-budget show in terms of the money they put into it.
I'm sure that's being a generous assessment.
But there was a lot to look at. I mean, the money was on stage.
Yeah.
That was certainly true. But Sky High is, as I say, it fits with what's going on the stage in the sense that they're falling in love. So it's a love song, but it also fits in with the motif of the gravity. Can you remember the, when did the idea of marrying one with the other come about? Or I mean, was it once again during the process of watching rehearsals?
I
can make something
during rehearsal. I can't remember if Carol said we need a song here or whether it was in the script, but I think we had an idea that might work. I don't think there was anything conscious about the low gravity.
That was just a serendipitous.
Yes, I think so. But obviously, in the hook of the chorus, and the same with Strange Attractor, the idea was to always have some lyrics suggesting space, sky, stars, whatever.
Atmosphere.
Yeah.
And create an atmosphere in the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. I like what you did there. And of course it does have a mini reprise at the end, that one, I think.
Yes, it does. And Strange Attractor does as well. Because we go back to the nightclub. May not be on the recording.
Because I have to say, I'm also, really casting my mind back to what is now very nearly 25 years ago.
Oh, God.
Yes, sorry about that. How do you remember? I mean, it's interesting because, you are, as I said before, you're the first man to write songs for the Doctor Who sort of canon, and yet the Doctor is not included in any of these songs. It is his companions or people he meets.
Yeah, that's true.
And both John Pertwee and Colin Baker can sing. I mean, John Pertwee was a great cabaret performer.
Yes, yeah.
You don't remember any discussion about giving the Doctor a song, do you?
No. It wasn't even suggested at any time. I suppose the idea is that you have the songs as background, and you concentrate on the Doctor as the main character. With it puts his whole character into a completely different context if he's going to be singing.
That's true, actually. Yes, particularly when it would be such a departure for at least the concept of the series. Well, it's perfectly legitimate if he's the lodestone around which other action happens, because that's that is part of the dynamic of the series in general. So I can sort of see what was done there.
Yeah, and of course he's on stage during. Not during Sky High, but he's there.
He is the strange attractor, certainly. Can I ask? Forgive me. When the show went on tour for I think 8 months. And went round, and it was a tour that was extended. I know that. And John Pertwee left when the extension occurred.
That's right.
And then
Colin Baker
came
took
into
over.
the second half, as it were. How did your involvement as musical director, I mean, both personally as musical director and the songs and indeed the music, because you wrote a lot of incidental music. There's a lot of, it was a scored piece.
Yeah.
How did that change over the time? Because, as you said to yourself, one of the songs was cut, but what were you reacting to? Audience responses, or need for timings, or just what was getting better response? Laughs?
In terms of the cut, I think maybe I'm thinking of the reprise of Strange Attractor, which you didn't remember, and I did.
It, yes.
So maybe I think that's probably the one that was totally removed, and Strange Attractor itself was shortened at the beginning.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. It used to be a bit longer.
I wonder, is there a reason for that? Is it just because it was such a jar?
We just needed to get on with it, really.
Bring on the Daleks.
Get on with the plot. Songs can often easily be too long.
Well, they're often the first casualty.
Especially when you're doing something that's not really about the songs.
Yeah. I do understand what you're saying. Yes, absolutely. Yes. They're the cherry on the top of the Bakewell tart. They're very lovely to have, but you've still got a nice cake if it's not there.
Yeah. You don't want to concentrate too much on the cherries. So those changes happened quite early on while I was still part of it. I was composer, obviously, and I was musical director for the initial couple of weeks at Wimbledon.
Which was where it opened, wasn't it? That's right, in March.
And then we went to Aberdeen, and I did that. And I think I left after that. And I just had a...
You've done England and Scotland. What more was
England and Scotland. Just had a baby at home.
Had you?
And so I didn't want to really be away for very long. So handed over. And
did you catch up with it again?
I saw it again somewhere else. Bristol, maybe? Can't remember now. Once or twice. And then...
But did it feel vastly different when you came back to it as a viewer rather than as musical director?
No, not really. But that may be because I was... watching it, actually thinking exactly what I would be doing keyboard-wise and which button to hit for the TARDIS door to open.
You still had your
I was still working.
On,
I couldn't shrug that off.
Looking back at the recordings, because you had to dig out, I believe, recently. We'll move on to this, in fact. Because just recently, in the last couple of years, an audio version of it, trying to encapsulate it, has been released by the sort of audio recording company Big Finish, and it's actually done it with a certain amount of style and gusto, if I may say, and your songs are intact in there. So before we get on to that, I want to say, I understand in preparation for that, you dug out, I think it's very generous of you, a cassette of the recording. I mean, cassettes being the way of recording in 1989.
That was my record of the show. Came away with a little cassette.
It's probably quite a rare recording in its own way, I should think.
Yes, I suppose it is. I also dredged up the sheet music from somewhere in my attic, so I gave them all the materials. I wasn't able to take part because they weren't flexible with their recording dates, and I was working on a show in Chichester, so I just gave them all the stuff and let them get on with it. But they did a great job, I think.
They did. It sounds very good, and the songs, I think, it's nice to have an audio recording version of them, if I may say, because you and now we're so far away from the 80s. Actually, a song which may have seemed to be one of several songs in the 80s is now, when it stands alone, is resonant and nostalgic, actually, in a sort of very cheerful, happy way. So it's not, the recording works as a record of the show, but it also works as to get a pristine version of these songs, which are of their period, and yet also they are exactly right for what they're trying to do, I think. So you've dug out this recording from the original show. Can I ask, just pulling it out of the cupboard and going back to the sheet music, I mean, how did it feel, I suppose, to find that something that must have seemed a little bit ephemeral and throwaway at the time was in fact going to be recorded for all time?
Yeah, well, I'm very glad I hung on to those bits, and I was impressed myself that I was able to find them. And it was nice to reacquaint myself with them, because you tend to remember just a little snip or a hook line or something about how you felt when you performed it or something, but you don't necessarily remember the full
range of what, yes,
whole song. Yeah.
And there's nothing like a song to encapsulate a whole series of memories, I find. I mean, it's one of the big unlockers of the lost parts of our minds, I find. You know, you hear a song you haven't heard for 30 years and you think, oh, it happened to me recently. I just stumbled across a song called Love Me, Love My Dog.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
It's a song from the early 70s, and I remember it because I remember sitting in front of the fire when I was 2 or 3, and my father dressing me, you know, for school or whatever it was in the morning, whilst that was on, presumably, Terry Wogan's BBC Radio 2 programme. And I hadn't heard it for, must be getting on for 40 years now. And suddenly you think, oh, you know, it's like a veil has dropped.
It's like a smell. You can
yes.
It instantly brings back a situation or a feeling or a room that you were in.
And you haven't touched for so long. Well, I mean, forgive me. I think I appreciate you was a very. Is it rude to ask how old you were, approximately, when you were doing it?
How old I was?
Yeah,
I was 29.
Oh right, so right at the early stages of your career,
Yes.
which is proven. Therefore, let's move on to this then. To be rather impressive.
Thank you very much.
You've been involved. Well, as you say, you're involved in Chichester, and it's not a one-off involvement in Chichester.
No, I've done 4 or 5 shows there,
and
either as arranger or composer.
Well, that's one of the great British music festivals, isn't it?
Absolutely,
and so many of its revivals feed into London. So, I mean, you know, you're one of the driving forces of the British musical scene, at least in London.
Well, that's very nice. I've done a lot of incidental music for straight plays as well, so it's not all musical theatre that I do.
Oh, right. So, but that incidental music is that with one particular director, or is that?
A lot with Trevor Nunn. I've done most of his straight plays, I suppose, since he was at the National and beyond.
He's not a bad director to be connected with, if I may say.
He's a lovely director to be connected with, and I enjoy working with him every time.
And of course, let's bring it right up to date now, because you very kindly give me a slice of your time here at the Puss in Boots rehearsal.
A pleasure. Yeah.
So, you know, forgive me, you're obviously no stranger to the full range of musical theatre, from Chichester to pantomime. I mean, you know, I love them all, but they're very different.
They are. I love doing panto, and this is. I've been doing pantos here now for 15 years. So,
at the Hackney Empire?
Yeah.
Well, the Hackney Empire is known as the heart of Britain's, well, certainly London's pantomime these days. There's no West End show. Hackney has, if you like, taken the mantle, I think.
Oh, that's what we like to think.
And it's such a beautiful venue.
It is lovely, yeah.
This year is Puss in Boots. Is that one you've done here before?
No, it's an entirely new story. We've survived the last 15 years on a cycle of 5 shows. The Big 5, Aladdin, Cinderella, Mother Goose, Jack the Beanstalk, and Dick Whittington. And
it is time to branch
It's
out.
time to do a 6th one. So entirely new script and lots of new songs. And
which you're behind?
Yes. Well, it's we normally do maybe 30-40% original stuff, and the rest are covers or.
Yeah. Oh, well, like any
songs.
good pantomime, you absorb from the from pop music and musical theatre, and any musical theatre influences on this one?
Yes, there's a little bit of a Les Mis parody.
Jolly good. Go for what people want.
Yeah.
Well, you'll be the master of the front house.
Ah, very good.
Or front of house would have made that better, wouldn't it? But you get the idea.
We're also providing the De Montfort Hall in Leicester with Hackney-style panto, which as soon as this opens, we go into rehearsal for that. And
how wonderful!
So it's the first time they've had a panto at Leicester for quite a long time, because at the what's now called the Curve Theatre, they tend to do a musical, a family show, not strictly panto.
Yeah. Some areas do that. Southampton's the same. They very rarely have pantomimes. They have a Christmas or winter show. Oh, well, Panto, son of Panto, if I may say.
Yes.
Panto the sequel. But that's very impressive, and also, you know, all power to your elbow, because pantomime is such a wonderful, idiosyncratic musical genre, and it is how so many of us got an interest in theatre in the first place.
Sure.
So,
well, we're very aware that for most of our audience, it's their first visit to a theatre.
And I noticed you make it relevant because even in the 3 minutes of rehearsal I was watching, I watched some of the curtain calls.
Yeah.
And the dancers came on to do their timing on the walk down. And I noticed that there's quite a deliberate thing where there's a bit of classical ballet against a bit of street dance for one of the couples that's obviously found themselves during the course of the show.
Well, something for everybody,
yeah.
we hope, in style and in character, and appealing to, different things to appeal to different age groups.
Steve, thank you so much for talking to me. Thank you also for dredging your memories, because it's 25 years.
It was quite
it's 25 years,
frighteningly long time ago, and I wasn't sure I'd be able to remember anything much about the show. But
well, entirely appropriate that at this 50-year mark for Doctor Who, you and I have travelled back to the exact middle point of it. So
we've done our time travel. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Great pleasure. Thanks.
Musical talk. Well, that was Stephen Edis, and I'm so grateful that he was able to squeeze me in. I actually had the privilege of watching a bit of the rehearsals for Puss in Boots, and it looks like an absolutely fabulous pantomime, as indeed they nearly always are at the Hackney Empire. If you get a chance to go and see it, it's currently on, so pop along and see it if you can. But back to Doctor Who The Ultimate Adventure. We've already mentioned the fact that its special effects were advertised as being something incredible. They used laser displays. In fact, green laser beams, which we're all very used to now, were used to create a laser prison for a prisoner of the Daleks. And indeed there was early animation and projection, as Stephen Edis mentioned, which was for the asteroid avoidance scene. There's a moment basically where the Doctor tells his new companion Crystal to operate the TARDIS's navigational controls to avoid hitting asteroids which are coming towards the scanner in the TARDIS console room. Incidentally, that scene was animated by somebody called Kevin Davis, who animated the television version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And of course, other things that you have to think about for the stage are how do you make the TARDIS materialise and dematerialise, and indeed on one occasion fly across the stage. All of these things were done, and certainly I recall that for 1989 it did seem like a tremendously high-tech stage piece. I'm sure it would now be laughed off stage, but in those days it certainly seemed incredibly technical and up-to-date. John Pertwee played the Doctor for the first 10 venues, but Colin Baker then took over for the second half of the run when the run was extended. And he continued until the 19th of August 1989 when the last performance took place. Although there had been some serious talk about there being a tour of New Zealand and Australia, which David Banks, one of the actors who appeared in the show, remembered being discussed for about a month as a serious possibility. Now, the show was incredibly visual, and so you might think it would be very difficult to make a successful audio recording of it. But, as we said last week, there is a company that makes Doctor Who audio stories, which is known as Big Finish, and they've been making full cast stories with the original cast of Doctor Who since 1999, so they do know what they're doing. Well, in 2008, they decided that the time had come to preserve the ephemera of stage plays related to Doctor Who, of which there were 3, the third one being The Ultimate Adventure, and that's the only one with songs. But as Colin Baker has said, it was very much a stage script. And of course the intention of the audio recordings were to make it true to the original as far as that was possible within an audio medium. So how exactly do you overcome the problems of recording a stage show, which is as much a visual medium as it is a sound one, into a sound-based recording? Now, of course, we're all used to listening to scores of shows on CDs or online on iTunes, and we don't bat an eyelid, but we very often don't get the dialogue, so it really is just a catalogue of the songs. And even when we do get the dialogue, it isn't always complete, or it isn't always easy to understand what's going on. So they aren't really the same as recording the show in an audio form, which was the ambition of this Big Finish production. Well, how did they do it, and what were the problems they encountered? Well, I spoke to the director of that recording, Jason Haigh-Ellery, and we discussed how it came to be an audio recording. And you can hear what he said in this interview. Musical talk. Jason, lovely to speak to you. Thank you so much for giving me a bit of your time. It's a pleasure to speak to the audio director of Doctor Who, The Ultimate Adventure. Can I start by asking just very briefly, did you see the show when it was on stage in 1989?
I did, yes. I saw it with Colin Baker. I didn't get to see it with John Pertwee, but I saw it later on in the run in Wimbledon. And as a teenager at the time, myself and my best friend got in a rickety old car and drove down to Wimbledon to see it on stage, and were both delighted, awe-inspired and shocked at the same time.
I think pretty much the same reaction almost everyone had. I was also a teenager at the time. But here we are, almost 25 years later, and Big Finish, the audio recording company that does brilliant Doctor Who plays and audios, has decided to pick up the stage plays, including Doctor Who The Ultimate Adventure, which of course is unusual for having songs, almost being a musical. And you have had experience of directing musicals, so how did you get the idea of transferring it to audio, and were you worried about doing an audio musical?
Yeah, very much so. I'd actually produced a number of musicals with Mark Goucher and with various other people, and I've always loved musicals, and when the opportunity came up to do Doctor Who The Ultimate Adventure, one of the things I was looking forward to was actually the songs, which is ironic because when I first saw it, of course, it was the songs which were the most controversial elements of it, and caused us to spontaneously combust in the theatre, a lot of Doctor Who fans. The opportunity was there to do something interesting with the songs, but in reality, I was actually rather looking forward to the songs because it is of its time, and it was an opportunity to maybe step back into the 80s and do something which was very 80s orientated with the songs. And to that end, we worked with the songs to make them feel like you were watching it back in the 80s.
I think that you actually had access to Stephen Edis' own original recordings on cassette from 1989. Was that helpful?
Yes, we did indeed, yes. Steve was very, very supportive and sent them through. In fact, he sent the original tape, which we guarded very jealously and then sent back to him.
Just being tape, of course, is a sign of the times.
Absolutely, totally. And I think we had to struggle a little bit to find a tape recorder to take them from, to be honest. The reworking was done brilliantly, and we recorded it in the Moat Studios with Tony Robinson Hyatt. And he obviously has had a lot of experience working with bands, and it was great because he's done so much work with us over the last few years on audio drama, which was very different to his earlier life when he was doing very big bands in South Africa. And it was a great opportunity for him to get back to his roots, as it were. And we were very lucky in that when I was casting for the roles of Crystal and Jason, and also for Madame Delilah, I was able to use some of the performers I'd worked with in musical theatre and who I knew were good actors as well. I'd especially been looking for something to do with Noel Sullivan, who I'd worked with on a musical called Love Shack a number of years previously. And I'd always kept in touch with Noel, and in fact I'd seen him when he was working in Vegas. He was headlining a Vegas show for a while, and when he came back, I thought this is a great opportunity to work with Noel again, because I know he's a very good actor, and that aspect of him hasn't been utilised as much.
Well, I think the ultimate recording is very successful.
Yeah, I mean, it was great fun to do. I mean, that's why we went on and did a sequel to it, to be honest with you. Because we had so much fun with it, we thought we'd do something else. But it was also great working with Terence Dix's script, because it was an opportunity to bring something alive that was ephemeral. It was meant to be something only seen on stage, and to have a permanent record of that was a great opportunity, I think.
You've certainly made a lot of Doctor Who fans' dreams come true, if you don't mind me saying.
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, it's interesting, because I think if you go back and have a look at it with a very critical eye, obviously it was trying to do all things for all people. It was trying to be a family entertainment show. It was trying to appeal in a way, well, back then and now, musical theatre is very, very successful. And one of the things you would do with any show is to put music in it. I mean, interestingly enough, if you look at Doctor Who Live, for example, which was done a couple of years ago, the core of Doctor Who Live was the orchestral arrangements and the orchestra centre of the stage. So it shows you how much, in terms of family entertainment, music is important. So I understand why they put a few musical numbers in, but with our schedule, we had one morning to do it, which is not ideal. We wanted to get the music out of the way before getting into the acting, and again, that's not ideal because singers do not like singing at 10 o'clock in the morning.
No.
So it was something which they were not looking forward to. Thankfully, we had three very good singers who were able to do the job extremely well. In fact, Nadine Cox went away, and obviously she worked on the music, but she worked excessively hard on her Margaret Thatcher impersonation. She was looking at YouTube clips for hours and hours on end to try and get it.
The method, yes. Can I ask, forgive me, as a director, transposing a song, which on stage, of course, is as visual as it is audio,
yeah,
just to the audio medium, that must be quite a challenge for you in the director's chair. How did you approach that? Because you can't have dancing, you can't have speech marks business.
Yeah.
And certainly in the song Business is Business, the one thing you're deprived of is the stage business, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was about to say, actually, Delilah's song was actually most difficult, because when you have a love song, you can put across a lot of nuances between the two characters, just in the way they're phrasing things. So it's not too bad, but obviously when you're doing a comedy number, physicality does, play a very major part of that. So it was down to Nadine again to really put her heart and soul into that and come across, which he obviously did. Similarly with Claire's song in the nightclub,
Strange Attractor, I think it's called.
Absolutely, which we all joked afterwards was a surefire Eurovision Song Contest winner. It's more of a pop song which you can again put across. So in fact, the most difficult song was Business is Business, yeah, definitely.
Can I ask about Sky High, though, which is the one in the second act?
Yeah.
Because whereas the first two songs, Business is Business and Strange Attractor, are diegetic in the sense they are part of the narrative. She is a singer, Crystal, and she sings her song, and Delilah is also seen to be entertaining her mercenaries in her bar. The third song just doesn't do that, does it?
No, it's two people who are getting together to just sing a love song for no apparent reason at all.
Like in good musicals, in fact, yes.
So yes, that's the one that's caused problems because, you just have to. At the end, we looked at various ways of doing it. In fact, I do remember there was talk. At one point we talked about maybe even removing it because it was... But of course, what we were doing was actually creating, as I said before, a historical record of something which was... And we wanted to be honest to the original production. So it had to be in there. Having said that, we looked at various different ways of maybe some intro whereby Jason maybe started humming and then started making up some lyrics and then maybe progressed into that. You see what I mean? But in the end, the only way to do it really was just go, sod it, we're just going to do it. And just launch into it and do it. And at the time, on stage, as you say, when Crystal's singing in the nightclub, it makes sense. When Madame Delilah's singing to her group of mercenaries, it all makes sense. This one made no sense whatsoever. So I do remember when watching it in Wimbledon, we were all cringing at that moment and going, "Oh my God!" They were hoping to get Jason Donovan and Kylie Minogue in it, which was probably never going to happen. But that was the good publicity they put around at the time. So it was designed for that sort of schmaltzy love song, and looking back on it, I think the only way you can do it is just launch at it and have a go. And I think it was successful in that context, but I think ultimately it was never that successful, full stop.
But can I ask just briefly, because I appreciate you've got limited time, but of the three songs, certainly to my ears, they're much more successful now as representative pieces of the 80s, which I sort of have a great fun and nostalgia for, than, as you say, that sort of po-faced teenage time that we all had, I think, where we clenched a bit during the songs. Do you feel more connected in a way now than you ever have?
Yeah, no, we actually had great fun recording them, and as I said, with with Strange Attractor, and we joked at the end with Claire that basically it would be the perfect Eurovision Song Contest entry. You know, we've done so badly recently, but actually may as well put that in and have done. And you never know, we'd probably do quite well in Scandinavia with it.
I think they do stand up in their own right, funnily enough. I can now listen to those songs with great pleasure. And indeed, hearing the play again. So, just briefly, should other people be interested in hearing this rather interesting foray into audio musical theatre and Doctor Who to boot, how can people do so? Tell us a little about Big Finish.
Big Finish is an audio production company that was set up in 1998 and has been producing Doctor Who since 1999. And we work with all the previous Doctors. So obviously we work with Colin Baker, who played the part of the Doctor in the stage version. And you can go to our website, www.bigfinish.com, and you can download this musical extravaganza for a mere £5.
That's a bargain, I say.
I think so, yes. And it's great fun, and it's a slice of history. And as I said, in historical context, it comes across really well, actually. And the songs today actually are quite representative of what was happening in the 80s. So it's great fun, and there's some great parts in it. And we were very lucky to have a very good cast who were all very good musical theatre performers come in and do it, and also to get back a number of cast members from the original play. And we had a great time doing it, and hopefully a lot of people had a great time listening to it.
They did indeed. Jason, thank you very, very much for talking to me about The Ultimate Adventure, and good luck in all your musical endeavours.
Thank you very much.
Musical talk. Well, that was Jason Haigh-Ellery there, telling us a bit about directing Doctor Who The Ultimate Adventure, a visual stage show, as an audio recording whilst trying to remain true to the original. Now, there are some advantages, of course, in doing an audio recording over stage, and that is that you can do retakes if you miss your mark or you get the script wrong, or if you just need to do it again. But of course, you also need to get across in your voice and in your performance some things which you could rely taking place on stage. And this was an issue that several of the performers in the show actually grappled with. Nadine Cox, who plays Madame Delilah, and who was also in Wicked at the time, actually said, "You really have to concentrate on the characterisation of the words, not just the vocal, or the tune, or the chorus and the verse. It is important to prepare the words, the lyrics, as that's what's going to come across in the audios." Now, the performers who worked on the audio recording were able to listen to Stephen Edis' original cassette that we were talking about earlier. And they also had Darren Lord, who was then the Deputy Musical Director of Wicked as well, who was acting as the musical director on The Ultimate Adventure. He'd taken those original cassette recordings from Stephen Edis, and he'd set up a click track which comprised a piano line for the melody and also a metronome with the rhythm. And it was from these that the performers were then able to record, in the space of 1 3-hour session, quite remarkably, early in the morning, the 3 songs for the show. And then Darren Lord arranged for the orchestrations to be made and laid on over the recordings after the vocal line had been recorded. And the actress, Claire Huckle, who played Crystal in the audio recording, also said that she needed to adapt to a 1980s style of singing. And so she used Toyah Willcox as her inspiration whenever she was called on to perform one of the songs. So, is The Ultimate Adventure a success in its ambition to be as close as you can get to being a fair representation of the 1989 stage show of the same name? Well, as I said at the beginning of the programme, I saw the stage play 3 times, and then I didn't hear it again for 24 years. But earlier this year I came across the recording of The Ultimate Adventure by Big Finish, and yes, I can tell you, it's a very good representation of being in the audience a quarter of a century ago watching John Pertwee or Colin Baker reprise their roles as the Doctor in what is still the Doctor Who musical. If you want to listen to The Ultimate Adventure, then go along to Big Finish's website, www.bigfinish.com. Well, that brings us pretty much to the end of this discussion on The Ultimate Adventure. There's a lot of information about it online, including various people's synopses of the plot. Possibly the best place to start if you want to see some photographs and read more about it is the dedicated website www.theultimateadventure.co.uk, which is an absolutely wonderful website featuring photographs and memories and behind-the-scenes stories about the stage play, not least how the Daleks operated. Unlike real Daleks on television, which have little men inside them sitting down, these Daleks were designed to be worn by men standing up, wearing them almost like hats. There's lots more nuggets like that at that website, theultimateadventure.co.uk. Well, that pretty much wraps up our two-part investigation into Doctor Who musicals. I hope you've enjoyed listening to these 2 episodes, which feel very different from the usual episodes of Musical Talk, not least because of the absence of any real Doctor Who musical. But even playing around the edges of musical theatre and musical film, it's clear that Doctor Who, like almost anything else, can be turned into some form of musical theatre or musical performance, and therefore, if only to investigate the edges of what musical theatre can be, these 2 episodes, I hope, have been faintly informative. And in a similar way, you may remember that last year I had the great pleasure in talking about The Snow Spider, the fantastic stage adaptation of Jenny Nimmo's novel. I found it a tremendously moving and wonderful piece, and it had a score by James Lark, an old friend of this programme. Not songs exactly, but a rich musical underscoring of the story, including both vocalisations and music. So not specific songs you can take away, but songs in all but name. It was one of the best things I saw last year, and delightfully it's coming back for a small tour of various places. You can see it on the 11th of December in Lyme Regis at the Marine Theatre, and then on the 12th and 13th of December at the Mill Arts Centre in Banbury. It then settles in for a slightly longer run between the 17th of December and the 4th of January 2014 at the Cheltenham Playhouse. You can catch it in London between the 6th and 10th of January next year at the Tristan Bates Theatre. And then finally, one last performance on the 12th of January at the Merlin Theatre in Frome. All those details, and a lot more besides, can be found on the IO Theatre Company website, IO Theatre Company being the people behind the show. Their website, www.iotheatrecompany, that's all one word, and theatre is spelt T-R-E in the French/British way rather than the American way, .co.uk. Go along and see it. You won't be disappointed. So there you have it. A full family entertainment from 24 years ago, and a full family entertainment of a very different style from absolutely right now, in this case by the very talented James Lark. Perhaps I'll see you in the audience. I'm certainly going to try and catch it in London. We're going to finish today with a tiny little wonderful nugget which proves to show the full circle nature of the discussions we sometimes have here on Musical Talk. We were talking earlier in the programme about the difficulty of musicals appearing in audio-only formats, particularly in this case about The Ultimate Adventure being adapted for CD or download in an audio format. However, this is nothing new. Amazingly, one of the great broadcasting giants in Britain, between the wars in particularly, was a man called Eric Maschwitz. Now, Eric Maschwitz is most famous for writing the songs A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square, which incidentally is one of my favourite songs of all time, and These Foolish Things. But he also wrote a song called Goodnight Vienna, which was made famous in a film and on the record by Jack Buchanan. But it came from a specifically written radio musical, actually an operetta, called Goodnight Vienna. And as I say, it was a musical written for the medium of radio, and therefore had to express everything in a non-visual sense. So exactly the same as has just occurred with the adaptation of The Ultimate Adventure. But the question you must be asking yourself is, this is all very interesting, but how does it link to Doctor Who? Where is this full circle that you were telling us about? Well, Eric Maschwitz in 1958 rejoined the BBC, where he had originally worked in the 1930s. And by 1962, his position was assistant to the BBC's controller of programmes. And in that capacity, he requested the recently formed BBC Survey Group to investigate ideas for a science fiction drama series aimed at children. in order to win a Saturday night ratings war with the relatively newly created ITV, its independent rival. Well, as you can probably guess, the results of that study led to the creation of Doctor Who in 1963. I love the way these things work. That's it for Musical Talk for this week. That loud humming noise you heard in the background throughout this episode has been the dynamo on my power-boosted open-ended transmat beam. And the little blinking light, which you can't see because this is audio, is telling me that it's ready to go again. So it's time for me to dematerialise. But I've just got time to say goodbye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk, edited and produced by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2013. And you must guide me on time.
Sure. Yeah. I'll wait until I hear people screaming.
Yes, I do that a lot as well.